Deep within Commoragh, separated from the cabals and the witch cults, reside the third major player in the hell that is the Dark City. However, unlike those aforementioned groups, this faction is less concerned with war and violence as much as it is obsessed with science, medicine, and technology. Sadly, for the rest of the galaxy, they are still Drukhari, and said science is as twisted as you would expect from them. The leaders of the faction, some of whom led the ancient Eldari Empire at the time of its fall, are professed masters of pain and suffering, able to cause untold agony to their victims and subjects. And yet, they form a vital linchpin for Commorragh's survival, making them critical friends for any Archon to have, and ensuring a fresh supply of bodies is always brought their way. Perhaps more so than with any of the Drukhari, pray they do not take you alive, for as soon as you're in their clutches, you will be screaming and wishing for death, no matter that it might never come. I sincerely hope you're extremely not squeamish, for today we explore the twisted nightmares that are the Haemonculus Covens. Wish me luck. This is Tactica Imperialis, and welcome to 40k Stories. The origins of the beings who would become known as the Haemonculi date back to the ancient Eldari Empire. It is thought that some of them come from that time, as most if not all Haemonculi are truly ancient. Most scary of all is the belief that some of the Haemonculi were, back when the Eldari were in their prime, masters of said empire, and if this is true, I assume they were still leaders as their race fell, masters of the cults that would lead to their fall. It would certainly make sense given the extremes Haemonculi go to in terms of pain and pleasure in the most perverse of ways. Whether they are masters of the ancient empire or not, though, many Haemonculi have a few things in common in terms of both mindsets and abilities. All Haemonculi, with maybe a couple of exceptions, are extremely old, beyond the capability of regenerating their forms to the youthful visage of most Drukhari, and many of them are actually functionally immortal with the ability to transcend death as a concept. Even if their form is utterly annihilated, Haemonculi often secure portions of their soul in artifacts or perhaps even pocket dimensions, meaning that all they need is a new body to inhabit to return to life. Some of the oldest, the greatest of this art have died many times down the years, but they have always been resurrected or regrown from their remains or from those soul pieces. Perhaps the technology they use, soul science as some call it, is a derivative of or an inspiration for the spirit stones and infinity circuits of the craft world, but it undoubtedly has one thing in common with them. Death does not forfeit the soul to Slaanesh, as it is protected from she who thirsts. This ability to resurrect the dead is actually not exclusively permitted to the Haemonculi, as it is a key part of their role in Commoragh society. If a Drukhari is killed as part of their real space raids, they can be resurrected by a Haemonculi, assuming enough body parts remain, and if they've made a prior deal, or if their cabal/cult is capable of paying the Haemonculus' fee. Only the highest status Drukhari can afford it, as said fee is usually paid in the form of captives, probably a heck of a lot of them, such as the value of the services rendered and because of the other function of the Haemonculi. They are known as the Masters of Pain, and amongst the Drukhari that is no small statement. They are sadistic in their experimentation, and woe betide those who fall into their clutches, for their suffering shall be naught short of incalculable. Without this pain, though, those dead Drukhari would not be returned to life. They literally feed off the pain and torture inflicted, laid in sarcophagi arrayed above where the Haemonculus is working, their bodies regenerating from sometimes almost nothing as horrors unfold below. And you know what makes it worse? The more painful and torturous it gets, the more the Haemonculi enjoy it, and when you've been around as long as they have, then only the very worst of things will even register to them, though certain things can be a guilty pleasure. Truly, I don't even want to think about it. It gives me the shivers just to mention it. And of course, when you combine scientific aptitude and their penchant for torture and pain, which implicitly gives a knowledge of biology, you get biological experimentation on their subjects, and even themselves. Many Haemonculi are as warped physically as they almost certainly are mentally, with extra limbs or appendages, and even additional spines marking them out amongst the Drukhari. Their servants fare no better, being flensed and twisted in many ways, but we'll discuss them a little more later. Just like some Drukhari trade captives for resurrection, so they will also trade for medical treatment or biological enhancement. Such an example would be the Scourges, Drukhari who submit themselves to the Haemonculi's surgery in order to gain actual wings. They will have their bones hollowed and their chemistry modified to allow them to fly. If that isn't a statement of the Haemonculi's power with surgery, then I don't know what is. Truth be told, it's not just the warriors of Commoragh who depend on the Haemonculi for survival, the entire Drukhari race does. As many of you will know, much of the Drukhari populace is artificially vat-grown. In a society as murderous as Commoragh, with a slow breeding race like the Eldari, there's no way the numbers will be kept up otherwise. These hyper-accelerated Drukhari embryos become known as half-born, and they are created exclusively by the Haemonculi and their servants. This means that the natural-born Drukhari, known as true-born, have managed to gain a higher social standing as a result, looking down on the half-born they consider inferior to themselves due to their origins. Regardless of their opinion on the matter, mind you, even the most haughty and Puritan true-born will be forced to admit how critical the vat-grown Drukhari are for both their cabal's prosperity and for their race's survival, and they owe that in turn to the twisted torture alchemy and soul science of the Haemonculi, to whom many will also likely owe their own lives, and part of their soul, since that's a necessary part of the regeneration process. Though most every Haemonculus is universally feared, reviled, and revered to some extent, they are not solitary creatures by nature. Haemonculi of like minds, having a certain ideology or preferred method of war or torture, will often gather together, forming what are known as Haemonculus Covens. These covens form their base of operations in the bowels of Commoragh, an underworld even more dangerous than the city above, which is already one of, if not the most dangerous place in the galaxy. Each coven will create a stronghold in this hell, a blend of laboratory and fortress that reflect their creators in some twisted way or another. I mean, at least one coven created a tower of flesh, using the technology and aid of Fabius Bile to mean that it was as much a living organism and weapon as anything at the heart of their base. Truly, though they may not be as mind-bending or corrupting as the domains of the Chaos Gods, there is no place I would want to be less than the home of a Haemonculus Coven. Within the Haemonculi work, creating twisted servants as abominable as anything sculpted by natural or unnatural hands. Truly they are master craftsmen, the Haemonculi, even if they are cruel and sadistic as they come. These servants and other Haemonculus creations form the armies of the Coven should they wish to be collecting subjects personally, projecting strength into real space, or simply showing off their work both to other Drukhari and to others who may or may not want to see it. The primary foot soldiers are the servants, lab assistants, and bodyguards in equal measure, known collectively as Raks. These individuals, shockingly enough, were willing participants in what they have become. Some were desperate, some had aspirations of becoming a coven leader, and some were just plain bored. Though they are similar in basic appearance, having all initially been Drukhari for the overwhelming majority, Raks are heavily modified by their new masters. Reconstructive surgery, amputation and bionics, huge amounts of drugs, anything goes for the Raks, since remember, they chose it. This makes them valuable as both compliant assistants and, by Drukhari standards, durable warriors armed with an exotic array of war gear. I won't detail all the weapons here, but the arms available to the Haemonculus Covens are horrific. Liquefier guns, ossifactors that cause mass skeletal growth, hex rifles that turn targets to glass. The list goes on and on and on. However, for every willing recipient of a Haemonculus' gifts, there are those who do not choose to be augmented or experimented on. Though mostly but not always Drukhari, the prisoners of the Covens are sometimes subjected to mass injections of growth elixirs, stimulants, and many other things, in an excruciatingly long process that can take years to complete. At the end of it all, at least, there is some measure of relief for the likely broken minds of these prisoners, as they are often lobotomized to ensure complete obedience. The hulking monsters that remain are the shock troops of the Haemonculus Covens, known collectively as grotesques, and they will kill and kill and kill again until finally given the order to stop or being killed themselves. However, it is not just in pure biology that the Haemonculi excel. They also have a knack for technology and machinery as well. The pinnacle of this, and in the eyes of many the pinnacle of the work a Haemonculus can do, is the engine of pain, of which the best known varieties are the Talos pain engine and the Kronos parasite engine. These are semi-sentient entities, a blend of machine and organic parts able to float on anti-grav motors for the most part, and armed with a crazy set of tools. The Talos is the most common of the engines, and it serves as both guardian and, should the Haemonculi be away from their base, a mobile torture chamber capable of rigorously dissecting and siphoning those with the misfortune to be caught by them. They are as diverse as the Haemonculi that spawned or forged them, though how they are made remains something of a mystery, and this means their appearance and armaments vary wildly. Some are more mechanical, others have actual legs, and their weapons can range from brutal to agonizing to everything in between. Worse than that, however, is the parasitic Kronos engine, which serves an altogether different purpose. The name actually gives it away to some extent. Kronos signifies time, so the Kronos is a time stealer, if by time you mean the time its victims have until death. Any who fall foul of a Kronos will suddenly and rapidly age, withering away as their life essence is siphoned off by the parasite engine. It then amplifies this and emanates it to all who surround it, rejuvenating the Drukhari nearby to make them both stronger and tougher, and thus even more dangerous. Of all the resources a Coven can provide, other than the essential resurrection, perhaps the Kronos is the most commonly placed order for an Archon, such as the benefit it can provide. Of course, all these things are a little slower and bulkier than the other Drukhari, which is no problem to the Haemonculi, to whom there's no rush to get their work done, but they will employ fast-moving vehicles to, for example, deal with annoying snipers who have the temerity to kill them before they get to the point. This makes the Haemonculus Covens unique to fight in another way, aside from the abominations and horrifying weapons I mean. They don't rush, they savour their kills, and they're hellish to face both physically and mentally. Sometimes they will work alongside allies rather than strike out alone, usually with a paying cabal or cult, I would wager. But though they will even work with their Craftworld cousins and the Harlequins, there are some Eldari they won't ally with. We recently discussed the newly emergent Ynnari, attempting to unite the Eldari race under the banner of Iniad, god of the dead. Though most every group of Eldari has joined them in some numbers, the Haemonculi have not, making them, I believe, the only faction in the species not to do so. The reasons for this are perhaps rather simple when you break it down. The Haemonculi are self-proclaimed as having mastery and control over life and death itself, a claim they can back up given their ability to resurrect themselves and others. As a result, why willingly serve an individual like Yvraine, who pretty much can do what they do, only, faster and perhaps better? There's apparently a faction of Haemonculi, hidden as hidden can be, who wish to awaken Iniad the old-fashioned way, i.e. by exterminating the entire Eldari race. But they're not Ynnari, since they don't have the plan to save their species at the same time, since, they want to murder them all. Also bear in mind that some Haemonculi, as we said earlier, were lords of the Eldari Empire the first time, so why if Yvraine rebuilds it, would they choose to let her rule it? Just doesn't make sense, does it? Though they are only a, admittedly significant, fragment of Commoragh society, the Haemonculus Covens have seen more than their fair share of warfare against a variety of species. The Tau have been on the wrong end of the Covens a couple of times, and one in particular has struck at both them and their allies in succession. It all began on the world of Vigos, a sept world under assault from a splinter of High Fleet Kraken in what became known as the War of Dark Revelations. The Tau were approached by the lead Haemonculus of a Coven, we'll get to him later, and the two allied to take down the Tyranids with a fair measure of success. However, the cost of this deal was a cultural exchange. 77 Tau from each caste, including 7 Ethereals, though that part wasn't paid, delivered to the Coven. In the following battle, however, the new grotesques unleashed by the Haemonculi had an odd look to them, and drone analysis showed that they were made from the Tau sent to the Haemonculi. When that Master Haemonculus appeared again demanding those Ethereals, the Tau refused, and in response the Haemonculi, along with none other than Asdrubal Vecht, harvested the planet of Rubicon nearby. These stolen individuals were analysed, and analysis of the group mercenaries showed their ability to adapt their biology via consumption. Seeking to harness it for themselves, the Coven raided the Kroot homeworld of Petch, focusing seemingly on the Shapers who help the Kroot select what they can consume. After rendering down as many of them as possible for future study, or perks of the pain engines there, the Coven made off with as many recruit as they could carry, fleeing the vengeful hunter carters of the Tau, attempting to help their allies. For the sake of the galaxy, I hope the Haemonculi never manage to distill the adaptive abilities of the Kroot, as it would effectively allow them to create warriors as flexible as they are deadly, maybe even create some controlled version of the Tyranids if given enough chance. Let's move on, that's too scary to think about. As we mentioned earlier, a coven of Haemonculi has worked with Fabius Bile in the past, with the self-titled Primogenitor helping them finish off something called the Tower of Flesh, a living, organic, Tower of Flesh. However, Bile took the knowledge he'd learned from the Haemonculi in exchange for his aid and began teaching it to some of the Emperor's children he employed, and the Coven would not let that stand. They were able to animate the Tower of Flesh into not just a tower and fortress, but a mobile war machine, and they assaulted the Eldari Palace Bile was based out of. The battle on Belial 4 was, as you might expect for the Emperor's children and the Haemonculus Covens, as filled with ecstasy as it was with agony, as both factions thrive on extreme sensory feedback and pain. However, the Slaneshi forces were beaten back, their titans destroyed or otherwise defeated by the Tower of Flesh itself, and the Haemonculi of the Coven came before their student. The apothecary was spared, which is an up, but he was surgically forbidden from sharing his Coven knowledge ever again. I'm not sure how they did that, since he can presumably still talk. Probably again, best I don't ask or think about it, but it's got to be a good thing, because the less people who can do what Haemonculi can do, the better. However, as we've referenced in this log before, it isn't just the other races who can end up on the wrong end of the Haemonculi. They're still Drukhari after all, probably the greatest backstabbers in the galaxy. A large example of this came on the metal-skinned fortress world Refusal in M41, where a coven and a witch cult allied to put on the most glorious of slaughter shows against a force of Cadians. The succubus of the cult had promised the coven the lion's share of the spoils, including Ogrin prisoners, in exchange for their aid. But she presumed too much, dictating the terms of the deal, which in the eyes of the Haemonculi and Commoragh etiquette was a big faux pas. The raid itself, once finally launched, was savage and horrific in a way only the Drukhari can be. But as the battle came to a crescendo and the resolute Cadians began to be overrun, the alliance fractured. Specially modified Kronos engines belched a purple gas that enveloped the witch cult, disorienting them and allowing the Cadians to launch a vicious counterattack. The entire cult on the raid was slain by the humans, even the one given an antidote to the poison that had enveloped them as reward for her treachery. But a worse fate still awaited the upstart and presumptuous succubus. She mutated uncontrollably. The tales of this account make me think she was transformed into something akin to a grotesque, a hulking brute, but without the lobotomy, and thus still able to feel the pain. This thing, whatever she had become, was scooped up by the Covens, who departed as quickly as they had come. The bemused Cadians technically were the winners, but the Haemonculi were the true victors on Refusal. They would hand over the creature to the newly resurrected leader of the cult, drawing rapturous applause from the crowd and reminding everyone of what happens if you don't give the Haemonculus Covens their due. Many Haemonculi have had their names remembered in infamy down the years, but none are as renowned or feared as Urian Rakov, known to some as the greatest of his kin and believed lord of the Prophets of Flesh Coven, though some claim he has no coven at all. Rakov is one of those truly ancient Haemonculi, known to have witnessed the fall, and with age comes experience and status. There was once a time he walks in the highest of circles in Commoragh, and I don't doubt he's still an incredible ally to have, but he has abandoned the intrigue of the Dark City and can seemingly call on whomever he desires to aid his work and collect subjects. There is great desire to work with Rakov despite his completely broken sanity, probably just for the regeneration you'll get from the spectacle of his creations. But the ultimate prize is to bear witness to what is known as the Carnival of Pain. Though I believe any coven can put one of these on, Rakovs are legendary as his fleshcraft is beyond ridiculous. His uber-grotesque, and yes that is their name, are superior to any his rivals and peers can create. These spectacles of violence can regenerate just about anyone, besides Rakov, who was twisted beyond all help due to a flaw in his regeneration in recent years. and the price for entry is incredibly steep. Sometimes it's a favour to be called in later on pain of death by sudden exsanguination. In the worst cases, a viewer can end up being taken to become part of the carnival in all the worst ways, but it's always worth it in the mind of those who come to see the danger as only heightening the fun. As for Rakav's motives, even though he has deigned to enter battles such as the War of Dark Revelations mentioned earlier, they remain unclear. He's died in so many ways and been regenerated so many times, it's like a fine wine to be savoured at this point, and apparently the wealth of subjects he takes are not required to sustain him, but his true goals are unknown save to him. It is known that he helped Vect prepare for trouble in Commoragh by stashing captives in a pocket dimension. Such a thing is not uncommon for Haemonculi, but this was a special enough case to mention as it was alongside Vect, and it probably came in useful after the incident with Ivrain. And I'm honestly concerned about whatever his intentions might be. Probably best I don't know, or maybe, I just don't want to know. Other famous, or infamous Haemonculi include Akathist Midillion, an aspirant to the Coven of 12. These 12, technically 11 since Rakov has an open invitation to become the 12th, but will never accept most likely, are self-proclaimed to be the greatest Haemonculi, incredibly creative and devious individuals whose racks will often have their skin flayed so their nerves are exposed. Ugh. The only way to join the Coven is by deposing a member, but doing that requires killing them beyond their ability to overcome it. No small feat given how capable the Haemonculi are at resurrection. Though some have been killed or trapped in gruesome ways, the means used by Midillion to try and join the Coven were insidious and honestly a clever bit of political manoeuvring. Having been in his mind imperfectly rebuilt following a serious injury, he gifted the Coven several Aelindrak shade ravens. These birds are known to drive those who hear them insane, but as refusing them is seen as cowardice, it would have just been wrong not to accept them. The shade ravens did exactly as predicted, and members of the Covens got even more kooky than usual. Not that almost anyone noticed, because Haemonculi are already weird. Eventually, 4 of the 11 members went completely off the deep end, however, travelling to a crone world in search of demonic subjects for their experiments. However, said crone world was rather overrun with demons, and Khorne was able to claim the souls of the Coven members, meaning they couldn't regenerate back in Commoragh. This condemned the Coven members to repetitive, gory deaths, the ultimate ennui I suspect, whilst Midillion and a few of his friends suddenly found themselves filling the vacancies in the Coven of 12, though what they've done since, perhaps I am blissfully unaware of. Finally, let us look at the main types of Haemonculi, specialisms or factions as it were, that will either define a Coven or be spread across all of them. The Scarlet Epicureans are commonly part of the aforementioned Coven of 12. They are believed to be the closest descendants of those original Eldari from the Fall. They are obsessed with the unusual and eccentric sensations, and will seek out unique flavours or new methods of being killed, and because of their age, these often need to get pretty extreme. Though it is unclear, Yuri and Rakov may be a black cornucopian due to his extensive use of pocket dimensions, but their obsession with the idea that everything is theirs for the taking, and thus their love of dramatic real space rays, doesn't quite match with him. I can see why the mostly Epicurean Coven of 12 want Rakov though, given his age, status, and savouring of death. The other great raiders among the Haemonculi are the Velethi, named after one of the lesser Eldari gods, the Dark Muses, though they simply enter real space as a show of dominance rather than anything else. I mean, no Haemonculi is a slouch in combat, they've been around long enough and have the mods, weapons, and troops to back it up, but if you have the misfortune to cross them, I really hope it's not a Velethi. Actually, they will make your death a bit quicker, so, Regardless, a group of Haemonculi I've personally become more familiar with are known as Repugnomancers. Despite the name, no, they are not odor wizards or whatever. Their specialty is in traps and tricks, which makes them a nightmare to get near, learn about, or get away from. The apparitions are perhaps the prettiest, and I use that term loosely, or at least the vainest of the Haemonculi, as they build vast mirrored lairs and aim to capture such things as vanity and pride. Given they're based in Commoragh, there's probably no shortage of that, to be fair. Perhaps the flat-out scariest of all, however, are the Mnemosynes and their offshoot/philosophical evolution, the Ever-Mnemosynes. These guys simply want everything to die. That's it. The extinguishing of all beings, both mortal and otherwise, or in the case of the ever-Nemesides, emotions and concepts like hope too. Truly the Haemonculi are a weird bunch. However, within the ever-Nemesides hide the Phoenix. That's not a pronunciation error on my part, it is X, not Ix. These are the Ennead believers within the Haemonculi we mentioned earlier, but being part of the Nemesides, they want to awaken the god of the dead the classic way, and exterminate the Eldari species. Whether they can be swayed to the side of the Ynnari remains unknown, as doing so ultimately goes against their philosophy as it would attempt to save the species, but we shall see what happens. Finally, perhaps the most ambitious of these factions is the Nadirists, those Haemonculi who go beyond even their kin in their depravity, reveling in it, and even making it one of their goals. It is said that their true aim is to become beings of such pure evil as to be gods embodying it. But I fail to see how this would work, and I just hope one of them never pulls it off. So end the tales of the Haemonculus Covens. Truthfully, there is no group I wish to cover less than these twisted Drukhari. Their creations and diabolical technology are both horrifying and disturbing in equal measure. And yet one cannot ignore the power and the skill of the Haemonculi, without whom Commoragh would have likely fallen apart or simply ceased to be by now. One thing is for sure though, I have no desire to remain in the Dark City for any longer. At least unlike last time, I have a safe way out, assuming the Repugnamanters haven't set anything up to get me en route. Assuming I do make it back safely, we have one more stop on our regimental road as we conclude the Regiment of Renown's mini-series on a world probably as likely to kill you as Commoragh is if you're not wise to it. For now though, thank you for watching Tactica Imperialis, and greater good be willing, I'll see you all again. Goodbye.